This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast
With Tony Bruschi.
We're listening to individual testimonies in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. We're now up to Detective Vince Kaaiakamanu, who took the stand, and hear his testimony. Let's take a listen.
All right, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, from the state, who will be calling the next witness?
I will be, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Blake, you can call your next witness.
Detective Vincent Kaaiakamanu.
All right, before we get started with testimony, Detective Kaaiakamanu, have you viewed any of the trial testimony in this case in any way, read it or listened to it since the trial started?
I have not.
Okay, thank you for that. When you're being questioned, please talk directly into the mic, use verbal responses for questions, and please don't talk over the top of any attorney questioning you so we can keep a clear record. With that in mind, Ms. Blake, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Vincent Keone Kaaiakamanu. Last is Kaaiakamanu.
Where are you currently employed?
Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been employed there?
18 years.
What is your current title and or position?
I'm currently a sergeant over the detective division and our school resource officers.
Have you held prior positions within the Fremont County Sheriff's Office?
I have, before moving over to the detective division, I was a supervisor over patrol division. Before that, I also worked in our jail.
Do you have any specialized training in order to be a peace officer?
I do. I attended the Idaho Post Standards and Training. I went through several other trainings that included homicide trainings, child sex cases, narcotics investigation. I also hold a certificate in my advanced certificate, my intermediate certificate, my supervisor certificate, and command training certificate.
Do you recall receiving a phone call in the early morning hours of October 19th of 2019?
I do.
Who called you?
That morning, I actually missed the call from Deputy Greenhalgh. Once I noticed I missed the call, I called her back.
And was that call about an unattended death?
Yes.
Did you learn who the decedent was?
Yes, I did.
And who was that?
Tamara Daybell.
And can you tell us why Deputy Greenhalgh had reached out to you?
So that night I was the on-call detective, and that's why she gave me a call.
And you say you'd missed the call. Was there a reason that you missed the initial call?
Earlier that night around 11 o'clock, I was called out to assist Idaho Falls PD in an officer-involved shooting. I was down there till about 4:30. Once I got done with that, came home and fell asleep and missed her call.
Did you call her back shortly after that?
It was approximately about an hour and a half.
When you did reach her, do you know if she'd already been in contact with another detective with Fremont County?
She had been in contact with Detective Mattingly.
And do you both take calls when you're not on duty?
Yes.
And you indicated that you were down assisting with an investigation in an officer-involved shooting. Do you also assist other agencies as part of your job duties?
I do.
When the deputy called you that night, was that standard procedure at the time or common practice?
It was common practice, yes.
Did she indicate anything to you regarding there being any suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of Tamara Daybell at that time?
At that time, she did not. When I got a hold of her, she had already informed me that she talked to Detective Mattingly as well. I asked her if there's anything out of the ordinary at the house, if Tammy Daybell's body was anything suspicious with it, if there's any forced entry into the house. She informed me there was not. She also informed me that there were 2 coroners on scene as well. And again, she had already talked to Detective Mattingly before myself.
Had you heard Tammy Daybell's name prior to receiving that phone call from the deputy?
No.
Later on, well, let me back up. At some point, are you aware if an investigation was started into the circumstances surrounding Tammy Daybell's death?
After her death, yes, I was made aware.
And the investigation was not started immediately after her death, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know approximately when Fremont County Sheriff's Office began investigating Tammy Daybell's death?
I believe Fremont County Sheriff's Office got involved approximately the end of October 2019.
So at least a few weeks after her death, approximately.
Yes.
Were you personally involved at the beginning of the investigation?
I was not.
At what point did you become personally involved in the investigation?
I got involved the end of March of 2020.
When you became involved in the investigation, are you aware if there were other related investigations being conducted by other agencies?
I was.
And what were those other investigations regarding?
I was made aware of an investigation on the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux out of Gilbert, Arizona. I was also made aware of 2 missing kids, JJ and Tylee, and that investigation was also underway.
And I may have missed it, but were you also aware of an investigation involving the death of Charles Vallow?
Yes, I was, with Chandler PD.
Would it be fair to say that this became a joint investigation?
Yes.
Did you also assist in the investigation regarding the missing children?
I did.
During your investigation, did you learn of a prior incident involving Tammy Daybell that occurred on October 9th of 2019?
I did.
And what did you learn regarding that?
Once I got involved with this investigation and looking further into other reports, I was made aware of an attempted shooting on Tammy Daybell.
And that had occurred on October 9th of 2019?
Correct.
Were you personally involved in that investigation?
I did not respond to that, no.
As part of your investigation into the death of Tammy Daybell, did you review that incident?
I did.
As part of your duties and involvement in the investigation, did you also review some documents that were recovered from a device belonging to Tammy Daybell?
Can you re-ask that?
Yes. As part of your investigation, were you involved or did you review some documents recovered linked to Tammy's phone and or her email account?
I did.
And do you recall reviewing a message that Tammy Daybell had sent to her son, Mark Daybell?
I did review that, yes.
And, Your Honor, I'd ask that the court and the witness be handed State's Exhibit 291. Defense should have a copy. I have a copy here for the witness to review for the court and a courtesy copy for Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
And if you would look that over, I think it may start at the bottom of the first page and continue on.
Okay, yeah.
Do you recognize that message?
I do.
Have you seen it before?
I have.
Your Honor, the State would move for the admission of State's Exhibit 291.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. May I voir dire?
Yes.
So, as far as this Exhibit 291, how did you come into contact with this exhibit?
I came in contact with this exhibit through a warrant that I did on Tamara Daybell's email.
Okay. And you used this exhibit during the course of your investigation?
Not this exact exhibit, no.
Okay. Judge, I'm going to object that he doesn't have personal knowledge of it, and it's not proper to bring it in with him.
And Your Honor, if I may respond.
Yes, Ms. Boyd.
I believe it's actually, and I should have probably clarified this, I believe it's already been admitted under State's Exhibit 108, which was the admission of the email linked to Tammy Daybell. This is simply an extraction from that exhibit and has been provided its own exhibit number.
Then I would object to it being cumulative.
And Your Honor, it has not been testified to. It's simply been provided as part of a global exhibit. And as to the first objection by him, I think the detective has identified this as a message he reviewed. This was reviewed as part of a phone extraction, which we simply can't pull over, that we couldn't bring in the exact phone extraction. So it's a copy of that.
All right, I'll need a moment, I think, to review what is Exhibit 108. Can you explain a little more about what 108 is? 108
was done with a business record certificate, is my understanding, and it contains the information retrieved from that email search warrant that the officer referenced, that the detective referenced.
All right, if you'll give me just a moment, please.
And I was just clarifying with co-counsel. So the 108 is the business record certification for those documents that were provided to defense in discovery. We do have a 108A that has been provided. This was given its own exhibit number of 291, but it could be 108B. It's under that same business record certification.
Judge, I'll just renew my objection that it's cumulative. If we need to use 108, then we should use 108.
And again, to clarify, 108 was only the business record certification, not the full records being admitted. I believe we'd done the certificates in order to be able to admit portions of those without admitting the full record.
108 corresponds to the Fitbit information.
It should also reference tammy.daybell@gmail.com as the email.
All right, apologies, but let me have a brief sidebar with counsel if I can. All right, thanks, counsel. The court was able to clarify with counsel and review Exhibit 108, which has previously been admitted, which is the affidavit of records custodian. Contained within 108 also is the records for the email address that corresponds with the proposed Exhibit 291. Having considered that foundation that's already in the record through 108, I've considered the objection of the defense, and that will be overruled, and exhibit number 291 is admitted.
And, Your Honor, I would actually ask that the witness be allowed to keep that exhibit momentarily.
The 291? Okay.
Yes, the 291.
I'd ask that you have to turn it over. I don't want him referring to it and reading from it if he's not gonna. I don't want him testifying from it, I guess.
Your Honor, I was going to ask that he read an excerpt from it. I can publish it to the jury, I guess, and have him read from that. But
I think that would be more appropriate, Ms. Blake, then, if you want to publish it.
Detective, can you see that on the screen in front of you?
Yes.
And referencing the bottom, can you read into the record who this message is being sent from and who it's being sent to?
This message is sent from tammy.daybell@gmail.com. Tammy Daybell sent to mark.daybell@missionary.org. Mark Daybell. Timestamped 10/13/2019 at 2:38:18.
And can you also see that on the screen?
Yes.
And is this a portion of that email?
Yes.
And could you read that into the record, starting with the now?
Now, on the same day, I was coming home from clogging. It was about
Your Honor, I'm
9.
going to object. I think we need some context as to who's speaking, who's writing this, what's going on.
Your Honor, he already indicated who the message was being sent from and who it was being sent to.
Yeah, the objection's overruled.
If you want to go ahead and start again there.
Yes. Now, on the same day, I was coming home from clogging. It was about 9:15, and I backed into the front driveway. I was getting some items out of the back seat. We had made freezer meals at enrichment night, and my clogging shoes. I realized someone was by the back of the car. I looked up, thinking it was Dad or Garth to help me carry stuff in. Nope. It was a guy dressed in black with a ski mask on, pointing a rifle at me. I think I was a bit in shock because I just said, "What do you think you were doing?" Then I noticed a rifle was actually a paintball gun. It had a hopper on the top. The guy started pulling the trigger, and I could just hear the clicking of a whooshing sound of an empty paintball gun. He stayed standing by the back of the car, just pulling the trigger while pointing the gun at me. For some reason, I just kept asking him what he thought he was doing. At that point, I was actually more annoyed than scared, because he was standing between me and the door, and he didn't step towards me or even say anything. The scared part came after, when my brain thought of what things that could have happened. The thought crossed my mind to hit him with my clogging shoes, but first I looked towards the house and yelled, "Chad." The guy ran around the house, around the north side of the house. I ran in the house and got Dad and Garth. They looked outside, but we couldn't find him. We called the police and reported it. They suspect it was a bipolar teenager who lives down the street and walks around a lot. But Matt Price has an even better theory.
And I'll have you stop there. And through your investigation, you had reviewed that email?
Correct.
And that appears to be, in Tammy's own words, a description of the events of October 9th, 2019?
Correct.
When you were looking into this investigation, did you end up looking at additional information from a Homer J. Maximus account?
I did.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 107B, if I can have the court, and I think I'm missing a courtesy copy for Your Honor, so I apologize. This is going to be a PowerPoint exhibit, so the actual exhibit would be on a jump drive. But if I could have the witness shown a copy, defense has been provided a copy, and there's another copy for the court. And if you could look through those pages. And do you recognize those pages?
I do.
And did you prepare or assist in preparing those in anticipation of your testimony today?
I did.
And do they in fact summarize some of the work and reviews that you conducted?
Yes.
Would they aid in your testimony today?
Yes.
And Your Honor, I would move for admission of State's Exhibit 107B.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that Detective Kaaiakamanu is going to use this to not only reference different things in his own knowledge, but he's simply going to read from it. This is what the state's been doing in the past. They're publishing these summaries and having the detectives or the agents read from these, and I believe that it's improper for the detective to read from an exhibit and refresh his recollection at will because he has it right in front of him that's been published to the jury and the gallery.
All right, response to that, Ms. Blake?
Your Honor, if it's an exhibit, that is the purpose of creating the summary exhibit, is when there is a lot of information and you're going to reference only some of it, is to highlight that and to be able to reference it when it's detailed information. We just had the detective read from a summary, from an exhibit that if we'd ask him to memorize that whole thing is just not plausible. And so I think this is exactly why it does aid in the testimony and it is allowed for under the rules.
All right, the court's reviewed Idaho Rule of Evidence 1006 and would note that it does provide for the use of summaries if there is contents of voluminous writings, which has been established through the foundation. So for that reason, the court will allow for the PowerPoint presentation of 107B, but would note also that it's a demonstrative exhibit and the jury will be instructed as such.
Thank you, Your Honor. Permission to publish?
You may publish.
And I think I'd ask, so just to clarify, did you review some search history linked to a Homer J. Maximus account?
Yes, I did.
Did you determine who is identified as owning or being linked to the Homer J. Maximus account?
I did.
And who is that?
Alex Cox.
And through your investigation, did you learn who Alex Cox is or was?
I did.
And who is that?
Alex Cox is the brother to Lori Vallow Daybell and is also the uncle to JJ and Tylee.
And in looking through these searches, were there some searches that stood out to you?
There were.
And what were some of the searches that stood out?
So throughout our investigation, this was
I'm going to object that he's just going to read directly from the PowerPoint.
And Your Honor, I don't even think he started to read from it. He was providing explanation.
All right, I'll keep the objection in mind, but you can go ahead and answer the question, Detective.
Throughout our investigation, this was an ongoing and a joint investigation with several different agencies, Fremont County, Rexburg PD, Arizona, and the FBI. Throughout the investigation, I learned of the attempted shooting on Brandon Boudreaux. I also learned of the homicide on Charles Vallow. I also learned of the two missing kids, JJ and Tylee. And then Fremont County started their investigation into Tamara Daybell. Looking through Homer J. Maximus and the Google search, there were a couple dates that I was looking at for my investigation over Tammy Daybell. But while looking through those and having all the information in my head, these other dates stuck out with me when I saw them. The first date that stuck out was the October 1st. October 1st, Alex Googles the address of the 3875 East Phelp in Gilbert, Arizona. This address is known to where Brandon Boudreaux was living at the time. The next day he searches the same address, but he searches directions how to get to that address. This search was done at 7:15 a.m. and later on in the morning, Brandon Boudreaux was shot at.
And were you able to determine, or did you see if that address was ever searched for again related to the Homer J. Maximus records you reviewed?
I did not see any other searches after that.
And you had talked about some specific dates that you were looking at involving the investigation into Tammy Daybell's death. What were some of the specific dates you were looking at related to Tammy?
The specific dates that I was looking at was through October, around the 7th, the 8th, and the time of the attempted shooting, and later on.
And in talking about that attempted shooting, were there some searches that drew your attention?
There were on October, again, in this investigation and knowing where Tammy Daybell lives. They live in a farm area. Behind their house is a very big open field, a river, several hundred yards behind their house on the east side. And so looking through Homer J. Maximus on October 8th, it was discovered that Alex had Googled 6.5 Grendel drop from 100 to 200 yards and also 100 to 300 yards. This was significant because at the time of my investigation, I felt that Alex was trying to figure out where he needed to be at the time and have an accurate shot on the attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell.
And at some point, did you learn or did you review where Alex Cox's data location showed him to be on October 9th, earlier in the day?
Yes, earlier in the day, Alex Daybell was shown with...
And I think, sorry to interrupt, I think you said Alex Daybell. Do you mean Alex Cox?
Correction, yes, Alex Cox. His GPS was shown at 4:37 or 4:47 heading north on 1900 East in Rexburg, Idaho, which is towards the Daybell residence. Once he gets by that residence, which is 200 north, he takes a right, which is heading east to Highway 20. Once he gets to Highway 20, he turns around and makes that route again around the Daybell residence. This all happens in between the 4:47 time and the 5:03 time. During my investigation, what I feel that he was doing was scoping out the area of Tamara Daybell's home.
Objection. This is speculative.
I will sustain that, and
Move to strike.
the answer will be stricken, and please don't consider that last response, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Did you review any searches conducted on the Homer J. Maximus account for October 9th of 2019?
I did.
And what, if anything, about those caught your attention?
Alex Cox on that day also Googled how to make a ghillie suit. On that date he searched the muzzle energy of a 6.5 Grendel and
Now, I'm going to object to him identifying it, that whoever was making these queries as being a specific person. I don't think he can prove that. I think that's speculative.
All right. I think there should be a clarification that these were searches attributed to the email, but maybe not that we knew an individual made the searches.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, these searches were conducted on the Homer J. Maximus account?
Correct.
And who was that account linked to during your investigation?
During my investigation, that account was associated and linked to Alex Cox.
And on October 9th, what about the searches conducted on the Homer J. Maximus account caught your attention?
On the 9th, it was the muzzle energy of a 6.5 Grendel. It was also the sizing of frog togs, the pants. This was significant. That same day, the Homer J. Maximus.
I'm objecting to him indicating that it's a specific person.
Again, Ms. Blake, if we could just have response, well, he'll make the responses he makes, but clarify that these are attributed to an email.
And I think he had just started to do that as the objection was being made.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Blake.
The Homer J. Maximus email and the device that's associated with was shown at Sportsman's Warehouse in Idaho Falls. Through our investigation, we learned that someone had purchased frog tog pants, flip mitts, and a winter hat that can turn into a mask.
And was that purchase made at the same time the Homer J. Maximus, the device linked to Alex, was at the Sportsman's Warehouse?
Yes.
And then the attempted shooting, in fact, took place on October 9th of 2019. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did you look at some searches subsequent to that date?
After that date, on October 9th, when I was looking, it stuck out to me. That account of Homer J. Maximus Googled how to prep an AR for cold, how to make your AR function in cold weather, AR cold weather operations, how does Hornady one-shot work in cold, is one-shot good lube for an AR-15 in 0 degrees, how to prep your AR-15 in winter shooting, how to help your AR load in the cold, do steel AR mag rings shrink in the cold. He also did a YouTube search on shooting an AR-15 at 37 degrees below zero.
And you reside in the Fremont County area or close by, is that correct?
Correct.
Are Octobers in Fremont County, do they tend to be cold?
They do.
Was there anything about this October that you recall with regard to the temperature?
On the temperature of this day or around this day, it was 26 degrees.
Did you find additional searches conducted subsequent to that October 9th attempted shooting?
I did. On October 12th, Homer J. Maximus is searching how to attach a cover to a ghillie suit. Will a Grendel 6.5 shoot through a windshield? FBI simulating shooting a 5.56 through a car door and wall. What caliber will penetrate a windshield? 2008 Dodge Dakota steel body thickness. What gauge steel are the doors on a Dodge Dakota made of? How thick is 22 gauge steel? How to drill baffles to make suppressors.
And Your Honor, I'm going to object to all of these answers. They have been. He's just been reading from the exhibit. It's not coming from his memory. It's coming from the exhibit.
Well, I think there should at least be a reference. I think summary's been admitted. It's allowed to be referenced, but there needs to be distinguishing between either personal testimony or simply taking information straight from the exhibit.
And those searches are designated on this slide, is that correct?
Correct.
And they were searches you discovered through your investigation, is that correct?
Correct.
When we look at those searches, what about some of those stood out to you in this investigation?
The ones that stuck out to me were the searches on the Dodge Dakota. Tammy Daybell and Chad Daybell had a 2004 Dodge Dakota registered to them. Tammy Daybell also drove that 2004 Dodge Dakota.
And do these appear to be searches by someone attempting to figure out what it would take to shoot through a vehicle?
Yes.
As part of your investigation, did you also review records obtained from the Fremont County Sportsman's Club gun range?
I did.
Were you able to determine if anything linked Alex Cox to having gone to that Sportsman's Club?
Yes, Alex Cox went to the Sportsman's Club in St. Anthony, Idaho, which is a gun range, 5 times through October 7th through the 15th. He never signed in as his name on Alex Cox on the sign-on sheet. He did sign in with
And I'm going to object to speculation, Judge.
And I can ask some clarifying questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Blake.
We see on this slide that we're referencing there's a date and a time, and then C. Quint Were you able to determine what the relevance of sequent?
The relevance of sequent is the license plate, except one letter to Alex Cox's vehicle.
And are you aware during the investigation of location data placing Alex Cox's device at the Sportsman's Club on these same dates?
Yes.
At some point, did you review or obtain some firearms that were recovered from the apartment complex where Alex Cox was known to reside?
I did.
Were you involved in the initial search, the execution of the initial search warrant recovering those?
I was not.
Did that in fact occur prior to your involvement in the investigation?
Yes.
At some point, did you observe firearms that were recovered during that search?
I did.
Did you, and what, if anything, did you do in relation to those firearms?
Those firearms were taken from the warrant that was served at those residents for safekeeping. Rexburg PD could not leave those there. Throughout our investigation, it was determined that possibly the attempted shooting on Tammy, and after having those those firearms in Rexburg PD, I obtained a warrant to seize those weapons for evidence.
And did you in fact seize those weapons?
I did.
And have they been kept in at the Fremont County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
Until recently? Some of them may be being held in evidence here in Boise.
Correct.
Were certain of the guns of more significance to you with regard to this investigation?
Yes.
Did you photograph some of those firearms?
I did.
Do you believe if you were shown a photograph that's purported to depict some of those firearms that you would recognize it?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask that the witness be shown, and I'll have them shown two exhibits, 281A and B. And defense already has copies of these. And there's a courtesy copy for Your Honor. And you've been shown two photographs. Do you recognize those?
I do.
Are those an accurate depiction of the firearms that were seized from that apartment complex?
They are.
Did you in fact take these photographs?
These ones I did not, no.
Were you present when they were taken?
Yes.
And you can recognize those?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask for the admission of States Exhibit 281B and 281A.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, may I have voir dire?
Yes.
So these two firearms, are they here in Ada County now, in the evidence locker?
The two that are here are the ones on the two on the that are taken together, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I think that we need to, rather than having a photograph of these firearms, if he's going to testify about them, I would like the jury to be able to see what they look like and to see them actually in the courtroom.
Response.
And Your Honor, I think it's up to the state how we present evidence, and a photograph depicting an actual item is sufficient evidence.
Well, may I speak, Judge?
Go ahead.
What I think is going to happen is that he's going to akin these to being some sort of a paintball gun or being mistaken for a paintball gun, and I think the jury needs to see exactly what these things look like, how heavy they are. There's certain things that you just can't depict in a photograph.
All right. Mr. Thomas, I'll take the objection under advisement. I'm going to allow for the admission. There's been sufficient foundation of 281A 281B will be admitted. If the defense feels that as part of your defense you want to have the actual evidence observed by the jurors, we'll consider that on cross-examination.
Very good, Your Honor. We just asked that the court inform the state that they need to bring that up because we will be asking for that.
Very well. And before we do that, counsel, I'll need to have a meeting with counsel, likely on a break, to discuss the protocols we have for firearms in the courtroom.
Very good.
And Your Honor, the state has retained the original exhibit. May I please publish that for the jurors?
Yes.
Or I should say exhibits. First, I'll publish State's Exhibit 281B. And are those several of the firearms that were retrieved?
Yes.
What was it about these particular firearms that drew your attention?
The one that drew our attention was the bottom one, which is the Alexander Arms, Grindle 6.5.
And if I publish State's Exhibit 281A, is that the one that you were talking about? Or was it the top one?
No, that is not the one I was talking about. That bottom one right there, the black one.
And what particularly was it about that firearm that drew your attention?
When Tammy Daybell first called in the attempted shooting, she described the rifle as a paintball gun. Out of the firearms that were seized at the residence and after looking at all the firearms, this one stuck out because it has a larger scope on it, which could be mistaken as a hopper, which Tammy described.
And a hopper is something on a paintball gun?
Correct. A hopper is on a paintball gun that holds the paintballs inside of it.
Do you have experience shooting paintball guns?
I do.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Growing up, used to shoot them all the time. We also use them currently in SWAT trainings and room clearing. That the guns that we have that we use for training are very identical to an AR-15 setup, which is close to this. Also has a hopper on it, and that's my experience with them.
Are you also familiar with AR-15s?
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about your experience with those?
Experience with those is training throughout my law enforcement career and shooting them prior to. You can put several different accessories on them and optics on them.
If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
You may.
Your Honor, may we have a brief sidebar?
Yes. All right, thank you. Counsel, you can continue with your direct display.
And the other photo we looked at that was not the gun in question, was that another firearm that was retrieved from the search at the apartments associated with Alex Cox?
Yes.
And you've talked about your experience with paintball guns. Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be shown State's Exhibit 282. I have a courtesy copy for the court. I'll hang on to the original briefly, and defense counsel already has a copy.
Very well.
Do you recognize what's just been shown to you?
I do.
And And do you recognize the first image depicted there?
I do.
And is that the firearm that you've been referencing?
Yes, that is the Alexander Arms Grendel 6.5.
And the second item there, do you recognize that image?
I do.
And what would that be depicting?
That is a Tippmann paintball gun.
And that is just an example of one, correct?
Correct.
That was not recovered from anywhere?
It was not.
Your Honor, I would move for the admission of States Exhibit 282 as a demonstrative exhibit.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. It's inflammatory. It does not depict what was actually seen that night. There's no way of knowing that. There's been no foundation as to what paintball gun was used that night, or if any at all. I mean, it's just inflammatory, and it's more prejudicial than probative at this point, even as a demonstrative exhibit.
And Your Honor, if I may respond.
Go ahead.
We did actually hear a description of the firearm in that email sent from Tammy to her son, specifically referencing a hopper. We've heard testimony from the detective regarding a hopper on a paintball gun, his experience with them, his experience with AR-15s, and the likeness. In addition, we've clearly established that this is not that the bottom one is not a firearm that was recovered, and that it is simply for demonstrative purposes.
All right, the court has considered this proposed exhibit under Rule 403, and having considered that rule, I am going to sustain the objection that I'm not going to permit the admission of Exhibit 282 as a demonstrative exhibit, as it could cause prejudice or confusion. So for that reason, the objection is sustained, and that will not be admitted.
Thank you.
Detective, again, you do have experience with using paintball guns and AR-15s?
Correct.
And there are similarities between the two?
Correct.
Specifically, I think you referenced a hopper on a paintball gun?
Correct.
And what part of an AR-15 would that be similar to?
Again, I go back to you can put several different accessories on an AR-15 and a rifle. You can put scopes on there, optics, things like that. And
was there something like that on the AR-15 recovered in the residence or in the apartment complex linked to Alexander Cox?
On the Alexander Arms Grendel 6.5, yes, there was.
And I'm going to move forward a little bit, and we'll circle back to some of these other questions a little bit later. Through your investigation, did you learn of or review an email that was sent from Charles to Tammy?
I did.
And would that be Charles Vallow?
Correct.
Did you also review or obtain an email sent from Charles to Chad Daybell?
I did.
And what were those emails referencing, if you recall?
The email that was sent to Tamara Daybell from Charles Vallow was in regards to Charles was aware of a possible cheating going on between his wife and Chad Daybell, and he would like to meet with her and talk with her to discuss that. He didn't want to send all that information in an email.
Were you ever able to determine through your investigation if Tammy ever actually read that email?
I was not.
So to this day, you do not know or have not been able to determine if that was actually read by her or not?
That is correct.
And then the email from Charles to Chad, do you recall the content or the gist of that email?
The email from Charles Vallow to Chad Daybell was sent on the same day, and it was in regards to Chad needed to stop talking to his wife, Lori, and tell his wife, Tammy, what was going on.
And those emails were sent prior to October 18th or 19th of 2019?
Correct.
And moving forward a little bit, did you end up conducting or requesting a geofence warrant for several locations at some point in your investigation?
I did.
What locations did you request those warrants for, or that warrant for?
The two locations that I requested a geofence warrant was for 202 North, 1900 East, which is Tamara and Chad Daybell's residence. The second geofence that I asked for was at 3462 North, Salem Highway, which is the LDS church just down from the Daybell residence.
And what date range did you request on that warrant?
From October 18th into October 19th, 2019.
Did you request a certain perimeter?
I did. I requested 150 meters perimeter.
And did you request the 150 meters for each location?
Correct.
And with regard to it, and was that warrant actually granted?
It was.
Did you receive responsive documents?
I did.
Did you review those?
I did.
When you get responsive documents on a geofence warrant, can you talk us through a little bit about the process from there or what you did?
When we get a signed warrant from the judge granting us that, law enforcement needs to go onto the Google website and go into their law enforcement portal. At that time, the warrant is entered into their law enforcement portal, and Google will respond with any information that is granted on that warrant. Once I got the information back from Google, it came back with what's called a Google identification number.
And when you get those Google identification numbers, what, if anything, are you looking for or do you do with that information?
So when we get the Google identification numbers, that number does not tell us who that number is associated with or who that number belongs to on a device. We then have to write another warrant for those numbers to Google with the same process, and Google is able to tell off those numbers what device that's connected to and who is associated with that device.
Were there certain Google identifier numbers that you ended up requesting additional information for?
There was 4.
And why did you request for those 4? What were you looking for with those Google identifiers?
So when I first got the Google identifiers back on my first warrant, I met with Detective Stubbs with Rexburg PD. We had gone through those numbers and went through the 2 geofences that were requested and went down and scaled it down from numbers that had been going through the first geofence into the second geofence. Those numbers were then taken and another warrant was wrote. During that process, I was informed by Detective Stubbs that he had recognized the number off of my geofence warrant. That number, he had previously wrote a warrant which was associated with Homer J. Maximus, which returned to Alex Cox.
With regard to the 4 that you followed up on, did you determine there was any connection in relation to your investigation?
On the numbers that I received?
The ones not linked to the Homer J. Maximus account. I guess let me back up and ask it this way. With those 4 numbers, did you do any follow-up?
I did.
And based on your follow-up, did you determine that those numbers had any connection to your investigation?
Yes, and they did not.
Did you actually speak with the individuals or determine why they would have been in that area?
2 of them I did speak with. The third one I could not get a hold of. I did do some research on Facebook and found out where he lived and ended at that because I couldn't get a hold of him.
And did he live within the vicinity of where these geofence warrants were being conducted?
He did. He lived north of the Daybell residence off of Trapper Lane.
And with the geofence warrant, do you know what kind of data that's looking at, whether it's GPS, Wi-Fi, or cellular?
The geofence warrant goes off of wireless information and GPS information.
So it does not include the cell data information?
Does not. That I'm aware of.
And you indicated that Detective Stubbs recognized one of those Google identifiers as belonging to Alex, or as belonging to a device associated or an account associated with Alex Cox. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did you do further investigation to determine, well, I'll back up. Which location was that device? You said you did a warrant for 2 different locations. Which location was the device associated with Alex Cox showing at?
That device was shown at the Salem Church.
Were you able to determine approximately what time frame that device was showing as being there?
That device was shown at the Salem Church at 10:07 p.m. on October 18th, 2019.
At some point, were you able to determine the last point or data point for that device at the Salem Church?
That device was shown there from 10:07 p.m. to 10:45 p.m.
And then at that point, did you have any other hits or data points within the vicinity of your search warrant for that device?
I did not.
Did you, through your investigation, learn of another data point later that night associated with that device?
Yes, at 11:53 p.m., that device, or Homer J. Maximus, connected to a device, was later picked up on Wi-Fi 7 minutes away on Highway 20 from the Salem Church.
Through your Google search warrant, or the geofence, did you locate a device associated with Chad Daybell in either location?
I did not.
Through your investigation, did you learn of or review statements made by Chad Daybell as to his whereabouts on the night of October 19th into the morning hours of, or October 18th into the morning hours of October 19th?
Through other interviewers and deputies, Chad Daybell had made statements that he was at home.
And yet none of his devices were showing within the geofence?
Correct.
Do you know when Tammy's funeral was held?
Tammy's funeral was held on October 22nd, 2019.
Within approximately 3 days after she was pronounced dead?
Correct.
Do you know where that funeral was held?
Springville, Utah.
Through your investigation, did you learn or determine if Tammy had any life insurance policies?
She did.
How many policies did she have?
3 or 2.
And do you know who the beneficiary was?
Chad Daybell.
And when you say 3, were there 3 different amounts referenced across 2 policies?
There was Primerica, Life Map, and then Idaho Percy.
So the Idaho Percy was the 3rd one?
Correct.
Which is a retirement?
Correct.
Was Chad Daybell the beneficiary of all of those?
Yes.
Through your investigation, did you determine if the life insurance paid out?
Yes.
And who did they pay out to?
Chad Daybell.
Are you aware if Chad Daybell has pending charges for insurance fraud?
He does.
Do you know where those are pending?
He has 2 counts of insurance fraud out of Fremont County.
And, Your Honor, I think with the additional questions I have for this witness, we discussed in a sidebar maybe breaking and reconvening with additional questions after lunch.
Okay. We will go ahead and take our lunch recess at this time. We will try to get started again just before 1 o'clock, probably 12:50 or 12:55.
All right, please.
It's not tracked, but it's right.
folks, so we'll be back at 12:30.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, I think we're ready to have the jurors brought back in, Mr. Bailiff.
All right, please. Jury's not present, accounted for, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, we're back on the record on case CR 22-21-1624, State of Idaho versus Lori Vallow. Completed the lunch break. Jurors are all present and accounted for. Detective Kaaiakamanu is on the stand still. I'll remind the witness you're under oath. And the state is continuing its direct examination, I believe, at this time.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Blake, if you'd like to continue with direct, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Kaaiakamanu, we had talked about some guns that were retrieved from the apartment complex where Alex Cox was residing. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And one gun in particular seemed to draw the most attention from you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what type of firearm was that again?
That was the Alexander Arms Grendel 6.5.
And do you believe if you were shown that firearm again, you would recognize it?
Yes.
Your Honor, I believe that we do have the firearm here. If we could have it brought into the courtroom. I believe it states Exhibit 280.
Exhibit 280?
I believe it's 280.
All right.
I'll make sure to have the detective properly identify it to make sure I have the correct exhibit number.
All right. We'll have the firearm brought into the courtroom. As we're doing that, let me just advise you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, any firearms that are offered into evidence in the case, we'll make sure are unloaded. There's no ammunition anywhere in the courtroom for any firearms that would be admitted into evidence. The firearms also, steps have been taken to render them inoperable. I'll have the bailiff explain that a little bit more once the firearms brought in here. The firearms will not be handled at any point by the jurors, either during trial or during deliberations, but may be available for inspection with the assistance of law enforcement. And with that in mind, we'll have the law enforcement bring in the firearm that would be State's Exhibit 280.
And Your Honor, I believe there may be 2 more items with that, and I can get those exhibit numbers.
Okay.
And Your Honor, may the witness leave the stand to review those items, or do you want them handed to him?
I think it'd be best if he did step down and just personally review the items and then can return to the stand for foundational questions. So, Detective, if you'd like to step down, you can go ahead and observe the items there on the table.
And there are 3 items there. I believe the other 2 are going to be State's Exhibits 278 and 279, but I will have the detective identify those first, what they are.
All right. So the gun itself is 280, is that correct?
Is that in fact the AR-15?
This is the Grindle 6.5.
And I can have him say that into the mic if the court would like, but yes, so that would be Exhibit 280.
Okay.
And what did you identify that firearm as?
So that firearm right there is the Alexander Arms Grindle 6.5 with a Vortex scope on it.
And did you see the other item sitting next to it?
I did.
And could you identify what those are?
Those are solvent traps that were drilled into to make a homemade suppressor.
Were those also recovered during the search of the apartment complex associated with Alex Cox?
They were.
And were those seized by Fremont County?
They were first seized by Rexburg PD for safekeeping, and then Fremont County seized them on a search warrant, yes.
And they have remained in the custody of Fremont County?
Yes.
And is that, in fact, the firearm that we saw in a photo earlier?
Yes.
And again, you went over your experience with paintball guns and your experience with AR-15s. And I don't know if the witness could step down to point out some things with regard to that firearm, or if we'd like it held up for him to do that.
Let's get to the detail of getting these admitted into evidence.
Your Honor, given the identification by the detective, the state would move for their admission.
All right. Any objection to Exhibit 280, which is the gun?
If I may voir dire and aid.
You can voir dire.
Detective, this is the gun that's in the cardboard box, correct, that you seized from Alex Cox's apartment?
That was seized from Alex Cox's apartment.
All right, and you know that to be the gun that was seized from his apartment. I guess what I'm saying is you weren't there when it was seized?
Correct, I was not there.
All right, but based on your collective knowledge within the police department, you believe that to be the same gun that was seized from Alex's apartment?
Correct.
All right, and you identified states 278 and 279 as being, I couldn't really hear what you called them.
Baffles or solvent traps?
Baffles or solvent traps. Okay, what is that?
From my knowledge, a baffle is a device that could be used to make suppressors for a firearm.
Is it just a piece of metal?
From my understanding, yes.
Okay. So those are just 2 pieces of metal that you found with or near the gun that was seized at the house?
Correct.
Okay. I have no objection, Judge.
Okay, so exhibits 280 and 278 and 279 are all admitted. And so, Ms. Blake, you can continue with your direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I don't know if there's a mic or a way for the detective to be able to step down to identify some things with regard to that firearm for the jury.
We'll get him a wireless mic.
Thank you, Your Honor. And while we're waiting for that, you talked about those pieces of metal. Would those also be referred to as silencers
Correct.
in common lingo?
Yeah, they could be.
And if you could step down and approach that exhibit 280. And you had described earlier your experience with paintball guns and the AR-15s, correct?
Correct.
When you're looking at that, you talked about a hopper on a paintball gun and something on an AR that could look similar. Does this AR, in fact, have what you were referring to?
And a scope on it, a vortex scope, which is a very large scope that could be construed as a hopper.
And in your experience on the paintball guns you've used, is that where the hopper is located on a paintball gun?
The hopper on a paintball gun can sometimes come off of the side of the gun and come right up to on top of the rail.
And in your experience, some of the paintball guns you've used, can they be approximately the same size as that firearm?
Yes.
And Your Honor, I would ask permission for the detective or someone to hold that up to display it for the jurors and then have those that scope pointed out again to make sure that they can observe it.
All right, I'd ask Deputy Vallow if you would assist in that, please.
And Detective Kaaiakamanu, if you could just go over and point again where you were saying that scope is to make sure the jurors can see it.
Again, right here is the vortex scope that comes down on the top of the rail of the rifle.
And if you could describe again where the hopper is sometimes located on paintball guns you have experience using.
Before we answer, Mr. Thomas, would you like to go where you can observe what's being pointed out?
Thanks, Judge.
All right.
And Your Honor, would you like me to have him point out that scope again once Mr. Thomas is there?
Now, yes, thank you, Ms. Blake.
So now that Mr. Thomas, can you see? Yes. Detective Kaaiakamanu, can you once again point out where that scope is that you're referencing?
So again, the vortex scope is on the top of the rail of the rifle.
And in your experience working with paintball guns, can you indicate again where the hopper is located?
On a paintball gun comes out the side and comes up right above the rail of the paintball gun.
And in your experience, can a paintball gun resemble an AR-15?
Yes.
Just one moment. And I don't have any additional questions at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Blake. Go ahead and just have the exhibit set down on the table there. Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. All right, Mr. Thomas, cross-examination.
Detective, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. So, you indicate that you've worked for Fremont County for a number of years. How many years was that?
18.
18. And how long was a detective?
7.
And you indicate that you're a lieutenant over the detectives at this time?
Sergeant over detectives.
Sergeant. And how long have you been the sergeant over the detectives?
Approximately year and a half.
Okay. So you were just a regular detective, and now you're the sergeant over the detectives. Is that right?
Correct.
There hasn't been any move back to patrol or back to another capacity in the sheriff's office in the last 7 years. You've been in the detectives division?
Correct.
Okay. All right. You indicate that you had some special training. You went to post. Did you go to college anywhere before post, or?
I did not.
Okay. So the first thing that Ms. Blake had you talk about was the October 19th incident where Ms. Daybell had passed away. On that particular day, you said that you were on call. You were the on-call detective. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So, and how many detectives do you have in your division?
At that time, we had myself and one other detective.
And that was
Detective Mattingly.
Mattingly. And then Greenhalgh was not a detective.
Correct. She was
Okay.
not.
So it's you and Mattingly are detectives on October 19th, 2019. So you switch off between being on call for that? Is that how it works?
Correct.
Okay. And so you're on call that night. You get a call from Greenhalgh, but you don't answer it because you're asleep or something else is going on. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. And so she talks to Detective Mattingly, but you still go out to the scene later that morning?
Negative. I didn't go out to the scene.
Oh, okay. So Greenhalgh was at the scene, Mattingly was at the scene, and then there were 2 coroners at the scene?
There was 2 coroners at the scene, Deputy Greenhalgh, and I do not believe Detective Mattingly went to the scene.
Oh, he didn't go to the scene either?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. But you somehow got in touch with Greenhalgh or Mattingly and talked about whether or not there needed to be further investigation, is that right?
Correct.
You were asking about suspicious circumstances?
Correct.
And there was nothing out of the ordinary about the death at that time?
Not that I was informed of.
Okay. And who else did you talk to besides Greenhalgh? Did you talk to Mattingly?
That same day?
Yeah.
I did not.
Okay. So you only talked to Greenhalgh?
Correct.
Did you talk to either of the coroners?
I did not.
Okay. So based on that, were you the one that made the call that there wasn't going to be any follow-up investigation on that?
I was not.
Who was the one who made that call?
I believe it was Detective Mattingly and the coroners.
Okay. So Mattingly didn't go out to the scene. So were you the sergeant over? Were you in charge, the head guy at that time, or no?
At the time, I was not a sergeant, no.
Okay. Who was the sergeant over you guys?
We didn't have a sergeant at the time. It was Lieutenant Powell that was over the detective division.
Okay. And did either of you go to Lieutenant Powell and chat with him about this at all? On that particular day. I guess I should clarify that. On that particular day, October 19th.
I believe Detective Mattingly spoke with Lieutenant Powell. I am not aware of what was said in that conversation.
Okay. All right. But then you indicate that a couple weeks later, you got involved with, or the Fremont County Sheriff's Office got involved with Tammy's death, right?
Correct.
And you got involved in March of 2020.
Yeah, around that time.
Okay.
Yes.
The state said that this was some sort of a joint investigation because it involved an investigation of Brandon Murdaugh, the 2 missing kids, as well as Charles Vallow. Is that right?
Correct.
And when you say joint investigation, what is your understanding of what a joint investigation is?
My understanding of a joint investigation is criminal activity that's happened over several jurisdictions and states, and that's when we get involved if something happened in our jurisdiction.
And I probably phrased it poorly. Let me just ask you this: when I say joint investigation, and you say, yeah, we were involved in a joint investigation, what kind of sharing of information goes on? I mean, are you fully involved? Are you not very involved? How does that work?
At the time when Fremont County got involved, we were asked to locate a Jeep out of Texas, or the plate out of a Texas. That Jeep belonged to Bryan, and she had gone missing. That is, I believe, when Lieutenant Powell got that call. And that's how we got involved.
Okay. And how about when you got involved?
When I got involved, it was already underway with the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux, the homicide on Charles Vallow, Kylie and JJ missing, and then the suspicious death into Tammy Daybell.
Okay. And so you were part of that joint investigation starting in March of 2020, correct?
Correct.
All right. So were you in the know about the investigation of the Brandon Boudreaux shooting?
I was aware of it, yes.
Okay. And are you aware if they were able to find any shell casings or any bullets or anything like that?
I don't believe they did, but I can't say yes or no on that.
Okay. And that's kind of where I was going with the joint investigation. How much did you know about what other jurisdictions knew? So that's kind of where I'm going with my questions for you. So you didn't know if they found any bullets or any casings or anything like that in the Brandon Boudreaux investigation?
Correct.
All right. And then you started investigating the attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell. Were you the point man on that?
I didn't investigate that. I looked into that report, and no, I was not the point deputy on that case.
Who was the point on that case?
Deputy Coulter Cannon.
Okay. All right. So when you say you looked into it, what do you mean you looked into it?
When I got involved on Tammy Daybell's death, I had figured out that previous we got a call for an attempted shooting at that residence. And so that's when I read his report and started looking into it that way.
So you read Coulter Cannon's report?
Correct.
Okay. And then there was an email that was circulated and that was actually brought into evidence. You recall that this morning?
If you're referring to the one that Tammy wrote to Mark, then yes.
Yes, I'm referring to Exhibit 291. Can I take a look at 291, please? Thank you. Can I publish parts of 291?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So this is the first page of 291. You recall reading from the bottom of that page earlier?
Yes.
Okay. And you basically just referenced who it was to and who it was from, right?
Correct.
But you reviewed the entire email, right?
Correct.
All right. And the email is 3 pages long, is that right?
I would have to look at it again.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. So this first page really doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about or what we're here for today, correct?
Correct.
All right. What does it have to do with, if you even recall?
She had emailed several people. This one looks like it's emailed to Shirley Newman. They talk about a lot of church stuff. She goes back and forth. She emailed several people on all that.
Okay. And I guess I'm wondering, how is it that the stuff that's really pertinent got put onto this particular email?
That I cannot answer.
Okay. So now I'm flipping to page 2, and what is that email? What is that portion of the email about?
So the beginning of this portion of the email, Tammy is talking about how her neighbor's dog was out, and somebody drove by and took her neighbor's dog.
Stole the dog.
Stole the dog. And Mrs. Price got in her vehicle, chased the person who stole her dog down, and confronted her, got her dog back, and then went into labor.
And that portion of the email about stealing the dog actually becomes pertinent to this investigation, doesn't it?
I wouldn't say pertinent.
Okay. What would you call it?
I would just say it was part of an email that she wrote to Mark on what was happening on the events of that day.
Okay. Let's turn to the last page of this email. So the last page of this email, the first full paragraph, starting with his theory. Do you know who he is when they're talking about his theory?
She is referring to Mr. Price.
All right, and Mr. Price is referenced in the line just above it, right?
Correct.
All right, and that's how you know that it's Mr. Price.
Correct.
All right, would you go ahead and read that paragraph for me?
His theory is that the crazy dog lady brought her husband back to steal the dog again. They had parked down the road, and he had snuck through the cow fields. He was going to cut through the front yard when I pulled up and startled him. He didn't know what to do, so he panicked and tried to menace me with the non-real gun, and then ran off across the field, which would explain why he ran to the north side of the house and why I never heard a car and we couldn't find anyone or him anywhere. It's actually a pretty good theory, and Matt is going to do some amateur sleuthing since the lady told Regan where she lives. I'll keep you posted if we ever figure anything else out.
Okay. And so when you followed up with this and you talked to Matt or talked to Regan, what did you find out?
That's what was happening, and that was his theory.
And when you talked to the guy, the lady that stole the dog, when you talked to her husband, what did he have to say?
I didn't talk to him.
You didn't follow up on this lead?
I did not.
You didn't think it was a credible lead?
I did not.
Okay. In fact, let's ask this. I don't want to jump the gun here. So I'm turning back to page 2, and let's read the first full paragraph from the bottom. It starts, I think I was a bit in shock. Can you read that for me?
What paragraph?
Just above. It starts out with, I think I was a bit in shock.
I think I was a bit in shock because I said, "What do you think you were doing?" Then I noticed the rifle was actually a paintball gun. It had a hopper on it. The guy started pulling the trigger, and I could just hear the clicking and whooshing sound of an empty paintball gun. He stayed standing by the back of the car, just pulling the trigger while pointing the gun at me. For some reason, I just kept asking him what he thought he was doing. At that point, I was actually more annoyed than scared because he was standing between me and the door. And he didn't step towards me or even say anything. The scared part came after, when my brain thought of what things could have happened.
Okay. So, let's take this a little bit at a time here. She's talking to the man, right? This is what she says in her email. What do you think you're doing, right? Okay. So she identifies that he's close enough to her to at least have a conversation. Did you follow up with how far she was from this person?
Again, I didn't do the investigation at this point when this call came out, so no, I did not.
Okay. But you said you followed up on stuff.
Correct.
This is one of the things you followed up on?
I did not have a chance to talk to Tamara Daybell by the time I got this case.
Okay. And it says the guy started pulling the trigger, and I could just hear clicking and whooshing sound of an empty paintball gun, right?
Correct.
All right. So when you fire an AR-15, or I'm not sure if this is an AR-15. Is this an AR-15?
This is an Alexander Grendel 6.5.
Right. And for the normal person like me who doesn't have assault rifles, is this considered an assault rifle?
It's on an assault rifle platform, yes.
Okay, so it's an AR, just not an AR-15. It would be an AR Grendel 6?
Correct, 6.5.
Okay, 6.5, sorry. Okay, so when firing, have you ever fired one of these?
Not Grendel 6.5, no, I have not.
Okay. So you don't know what they sound like when they're fired?
I do not.
Okay. Do you have experience with other assault rifles, though, correct?
Correct.
Some that are similar to this?
Correct.
Okay. Do they make a whooshing sound when they're fired?
If you were to have a suppressor on it, and depending on what size of bullet, it wouldn't make a whooshing sound, but it'd be very quiet.
Okay. So when you say what type of bullet, you would have to actually have a subsonic type of bullet, right?
Correct.
Something that is a specialized bullet specifically for guns that you put suppressors on, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And where do you get that ammunition?
I'm not sure if you can buy it. Usually people make it.
Okay.
Reload.
Okay. And did you find any reloading equipment or any of this type of subsonic things that are subsonic type ammunition in Alex Cox's apartment?
In Alex Cox's belonging, there were some reloading equipment, not a full setup, but there were some.
Okay. You didn't find any subsonic bullets or subsonic casings?
I did not.
Okay. Would you hear the click and the whoosh if you were to fire that with a suppressor on it?
Again, it depends on the caliber that's going through. Maybe a malfunction, you'd hear a click. But other than that, that's about it.
Right. But if you would hear the click, you wouldn't hear the whoosh, right?
Correct.
So you'd either hear a click or a whoosh.
Possibly, yes.
Okay. But generally not both.
Generally not both, yes.
Okay. And when this type of a firearm is fired, where does the casing go? It ejects, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And it would go somewhere in the general area of where the person who shot it, probably within 6 feet, I'm assuming?
Possibly. I'm not sure of the trajectory, but yeah, possibly, unless they had a malfunction and the casing stayed inside the rifle.
Well, if they had a malfunction and the casing stayed inside the rifle, you wouldn't hear any more clicks and any more whooshing, right?
You would hear a click.
But no whooshing?
No whooshing.
Okay. And so, did you later go out to the scene of this particular event and with a metal detector try to find some sort of casings or bullets or anything?
I did not go out there. I do know that there was a warrant for that residence, and at that time, several other deputies and officers did do that with metal detectors and tried to locate a casing.
Okay. Did they find anything?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. When you looked around, you obviously looked around the property, right? Where this bullet would have, the trajectory that it would have gone to?
Again, I was not out there.
Okay. To your knowledge, did anybody find any bullet holes in any buildings or any of the houses or cars or anything nearby?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay. But you guys looked?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so let's read, starting with this last paragraph on that page. It's 3 lines long, and then we'll read the remainder of that paragraph on the next page. Can you go ahead and do that for me?
The thought crossed my mind to hit him with my clogging shoes, but first I looked towards the house and yelled, "Chad." The guy ran off around the north side of the house. I ran in the house and got Dad and Garth. They looked outside, but we couldn't find him. We called the police and reported it. They suspect it was a bipolar teenager who lives down the street and walks around a lot. But Matt Price has a better theory.
All right. And so the suspect, they thought, was a person who was a bipolar teenager who lives down the street and walks around a lot. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. And did you check into that bipolar teenager?
We talked to several individuals around the area about the bipolar is what they put there, the bipolar teenager, and in fact found out he had autism, and he lived a lot further away from the Daybell residence than what would have been in walking distance.
Okay. And I don't want to drag an autistic child into this, but did you end up talking to the autistic child?
I did not.
Okay. So no further follow-up was done on the suspected bipolar teenage child?
No.
Okay. So of all the people mentioned in here that it could be, you really didn't follow up talking to any of those people that were mentioned in here?
We talked to Matt and Regan Price.
Right, but they weren't suspected of shooting Tammy, right?
No, that was Matt's theory.
Okay. But the people that were suspected, the theories or the people that were suspected of doing this, you didn't talk to any of them?
Correct.
Okay. So through your investigation, you did some, and I'm sorry, I'm done with this exhibit. Thank you. I would like to now see 107B. Thank you. So, we've already established that there is a gun that you found in Alex Cox's possession, correct?
Rexburg PD found that, yes.
I'm sorry. When I say you, I guess I mean collectively the joint investigation.
Correct.
Okay. So I'd like to turn to this second page. And this is a lot harder than it looks, getting this thing stabilized. I was, all right. So we've established that you found, or somebody found, a Grendel 6.5. Does anybody know when that gun was purchased?
I don't have that in the investigation. I believe our guys have looked into that and do know.
So somebody knows, but you don't?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know who might know?
I believe Detective Kaaiakamanu or FBI Agent Douglas.
Okay. And they ran the serial number off the gun?
That I am not sure.
Okay. Is that I'm just asking because I don't know. Is that how you would generally do it, is run the serial number?
Usually when we collect guns, yes, we run all the serial numbers. I do not know if they did.
Okay. And that's generally to see if they're stolen or something like that?
Correct.
And how would you find the purchase? And again, I've never bought a gun, so I don't really know. But when you purchase a gun, I'm assuming they have to do something with that serial number, or no? Do you know?
What do you mean by doing something to it?
Well, when somebody sells me something, I get a receipt for it. But do we have to register the gun in some way, or is it just only if it comes up stolen? Is that when they put it in the system?
When you purchase a firearm, they'll associate that serial number to whoever purchased it.
Okay.
So that's how that's done.
Okay. And so that's how you track, that's how you're assuming that maybe Detective Kaaiakamanu found that out?
Along with receipts.
Okay. So would it be out of the ordinary for someone to search, if they bought a gun like that, to make searches like 6.5 Grendel drop from 100 yards to 200 yards, if they owned a 6.5 Grendel?
It would depend what they're shooting it for.
Okay. What would you shoot that particular gun for?
Usually long range.
Okay. Hunting?
Depends. I wouldn't purchase that firearm for hunting.
Right. It's only for target practice or for guys to be machismo and hey, I got a big gun, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if you go to the range, are you going to want to know what, and maybe let me just ask you this because I'm not really sure about it either. 6.5 Grendel drop from 100 yards to 200 yards. What does that mean?
So the further you're back in yardage in shooting, your bullet's going to drop a little bit. And so with your scope is you need to dial that in. So you shoot to get it accurate from several different yards, different 100 yards, so you can be accurate at one. And usually when you get that sighted in, you kind of stay at that yardage for that. And so when you say that the bullet is going to drop, it's due to gravity, it's due to drift, it's due to wind, those kinds of things, right? Correct.
All right. And so if you're target practicing, you're going to want to be on target, am I right?
Correct.
And the way to know that is to go through the internet, make these searches, find those kinds of things. Is that one way to do it?
Yes, it is. Okay.
Another way would be to find somebody who has one of these, and you can talk to them, and they can, you can form a club or whatever and be buddy-buddy and work it out that way, right?
Yes.
But if you're new to the area, one of the best ways to do that is to get online, right?
Correct.
All right. And these Google searches that were done on October the 10th, the reason that you did a summary is because what the state reporter or what they told the court was because there was a voluminous information, and it's to kind of square down and pack down what your pertinent ones were, right?
That's not why I looked these specific dates over, no.
Okay, but what you found on these specific dates, these are not the only searches that were done on those particular dates.
Correct.
All right. There were some searches that you didn't put on here.
On the Google search itself, like this says up at top, these were the Google searches of that day of this information.
All the Google searches?
Yes.
Every search that he did on that day is on this piece of paper.
There were some other searches as far as, if you'd like me to go in that, I can.
Yeah, tell me everything that was on that day.
There were
Starting
other
from
searches
midnight.
of,
Talking over the top of each other. And
Okay.
you can make a record.
Starting from midnight, tell me every search that was on October the 10th, 2019 that came off of this Google account.
I'm not sure starting at midnight, but there were several searches of trannies. There were several searches of pornography that I didn't think was pertinent to this slide to bring in today.
Okay. So what you're saying is there are a lot of other things that were on this Google search that was done throughout the day rather than these particular searches that you made.
Correct.
Okay. So I guess what I'm saying is we're not trying to mislead the jury to say, hey, this guy is a gun nut and he's looking at this specific things all day long. This is all he's doing. There was a lot of other things he was doing.
Correct.
All right. Same thing on this slide. October the 12th, 2019. These are not the only searches that were done on October the 12th, 2019, correct?
Correct.
There were a lot of other searches.
Similar to what I just mentioned.
All right. There's a lot of other things going on, right?
Correct.
All right. Okay. On this particular slide, I don't know that you know this. You probably shouldn't know this because we had another person who testified, and he actually showed what searches or what who had signed in on every single day. And these were long sheets of paper, correct? Like a full sheet of paper. There were other people's names on these, right?
Yes.
All right, and that's where you got the information on this particular slide was from those sign-in sheets, right?
Yes.
All right. And so when you went to Fremont County Sportsman's Club, who did you talk to when you went there?
That was Lieutenant Powell that got this information. And
Okay, so this isn't your information?
this is not my information that I retrieved, no.
So somebody else made this slide for you?
No, I made this slide with our prosecutors, but the information was from another report. Again, it goes back to a joint investigation that we have shared information and put everything together.
Okay, and who was it that did this particular investigation?
When Lieutenant Powell was first started on the investigation, he retrieved this information. When I took over the investigation, he was no longer part of the investigation, so I took over that information.
Okay, and in the information that he gave to you, there was a report that indicated that he had actually talked to people at the Fremont Sportsman's Club?
He talked to Les Ball, who is he's the president of the board
Okay.
of the Sportsman's Association.
All right. And did you or anybody that you know actually go out to the Sportsman Club and investigate anybody that was on any of those sheets?
Anybody else that was on the names?
Any of the names that were on the sheets of paper on the days that you're alleging that Alex Cox was there with the name of C. Quint?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So you didn't do any investigation? Nobody did any investigation as to who else was there, who might have seen Alex Cox there?
No.
Okay. So based on the totality of what we were looking at, you're saying that you didn't investigate and you don't know who investigated the autistic boy or bipolar teenager, and you didn't investigate, or you don't know that anybody investigated the person, the husband who stole the dog, and nobody went out and talked to anybody at the shooting range who may have seen Alex Cox on that day, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, when you did the investigation with regards to the geofence, you did a geofence warrant for 2 different locations, 202 North, 1900 East, and that's Chad's house, correct?
Correct.
And you also did 3462 North Salem Highway, and that's the church that's about 2.7 miles from Chad's house?
2.6.
2.6 miles?
Correct.
Okay. And you did a geofence of 150-meter perimeter, is that right?
Correct.
So how does that work? Do you go from the center of the property 150 yards in either direction, or 150 yards total?
It's in the center of the property, 150 yards all the way around in a circle.
So 150 yards in any direction?
150 meters, yes.
I'm sorry, 150 meters. And a meter is roughly a yard, right?
Roughly, but we'll stick with meters.
Okay. Meter is 3.3 feet, right?
That I am not sure off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, I dove in college, and I'm telling you it's 3.3 feet. Would that be accurate?
Objection, Your Honor. Defense is trying to introduce testimony, not in evidence.
Sustained.
Okay. All right. So we'll say meters, okay, for whatever it's worth. 150 meters. Do you know how far 150 meters is if you were standing at one end of a football field?
I do not.
Okay. You have no idea?
No idea.
Not even a clue?
I just said no.
Okay. All right. Do you know how many feet 150 meters is?
I do not.
Didn't bother to check to see how far it was?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. I think the detective already testified to the distance within the warrant.
It's asked and answered.
Okay, Judge. So 150 meters, you indicated that you thought that Chad Daybell's phone, or I'm sorry, not Chad Daybell's phone, Alex Cox's phone was in the church parking lot within 150 meters.
I testified to a device that was associated with Alex Cox's Homer J. Maximus was pinging in the vicinity of the church.
Within 150 meters?
Within the 150 meters of my geofence location.
Okay. And did you get anything more specific than somewhere within 150 meters?
I guess I don't understand that question.
Okay. You have a geofence location, which is a large circle, right?
Correct.
I'm just going to guess. And then you have a pinpoint in the middle of that circle, which would be the dot where everything is focused on, right?
Correct.
Okay. So is there anything within that larger circle, can you pinpoint in any particular direction or any particular area where this Homer J. Maximus phone was located, or was it the only information you got was it was somewhere within the 150 meter range?
It was showing Wi-Fi hits off the backside of the church.
Okay. Okay, and that's what you got, was the Wi-Fi hits?
Correct.
And the Wi-Fi hits came from somebody else's house?
Correct.
Okay. Can I have you walk over and pick up 278 or 279, actually both of them?
And, Your Honor, I don't know if he's going to have him walk back to the stand or if we need the handheld mic again.
Well, 278 and 279 can just be delivered to him on the stand.
That's fine, Judge.
Okay, you can return to your seat. Thanks.
And I apologize for the interruption. Just wanted to clarify that.
That's fine, Ms. Blake. Thank you.
So I think you testified earlier that 278 and 279 were, I forgot what you called them now.
Baffles.
Baffles. Okay. So when I said, so baffle is just a chunk of metal, is that right? Is that what you're looking at?
From my understanding, yes.
Okay. Is there anything that, I mean, it's a round piece of metal, right? It's circular, kind of like a tube,
Yes.
and it's solid?
Yes.
All right. And there's not been any drill holes in it or anything like that?
There's a drill hole on both ends.
Okay. And does it go all the way through?
No.
Okay. So it couldn't be used as a suppressor. It would actually blow the gun up, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Nothing further.
All right, let's have the exhibits returned to the table there, please. Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Kaaiakamanu, you were asked about whether or not anyone else responded out on the morning of October 19th, 2019, besides the deputy and the two individuals from the coroner's office, correct?
Correct.
And to the best of your knowledge, did any detectives respond out that morning?
No, they did not.
Do you know why that was?
When I called the coroner back after I missed her call approximately an hour later, she had told me that she had already talked to Detective Mattingly and had walked through everything with Detective Mattingly. After that conversation, I also asked Deputy Greenhalgh, again, if anything was out of the ordinary, any forced entry, anything sticking out to her. I was not made aware of anything. I also asked her if the coroner saw anything that was different or out of the ordinary. She told me no.
And on October 19th of 2019, were you aware of or had you heard of J.J. Vallow?
Of October 19th,
Yes, prior to Fremont County becoming involved, had you heard of J.J. Vallow?
yes.
And did you hear of J.J. Vallow before you became involved in the investigation?
I did.
Did you hear of him prior to the end of October?
Yes.
Aaron, I'm going to object. These questions are all beyond the scope of cross-examination. I didn't talk anything about J.J. Vallow.
I'll overrule that at this point, Ms. Blake, but it's getting close to beyond the scope, I would say.
On October 19th of 2019, were you, actually I'll back up, you testified that you did not become involved in an investigation regarding the death of Tammy Daybell until 2020, is that correct?
Correct.
And I think you also testified in response to cross that when Fremont became involved, they were assisting or looking for a Jeep.
Correct.
Do you know if that Jeep was reported to have been involved in or suspected in criminal activity?
I believe it was.
And do you know where that criminal activity would have occurred?
In Gilbert, Arizona.
Was Fremont County in, and do you know when that request was made, or approximately when?
I can't think of it off the top of my head. I would have to refer.
I think you testified previously Fremont County did not become involved in a joint investigation until the end of October of 2019?
Correct.
And that was after the death of Tamara Daybell?
Correct.
So on the morning she died, to the best of your knowledge, did Fremont County have all of the information regarding those other investigations?
They did not have all the information, no.
You were asked about why there was some other information on that email that you were looking at.
Yes.
And at the bottom of that first page, you'd read off the sender, the person it was sent to, and a date. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then the body of that actual email started on the next page. Is that correct?
Correct.
So with the phone extraction, would there have been remnants of a prior email?
Yes.
And that's what was contained on the first page?
Yes.
And you were asked a lot about the contents of that email, specifically mention of a bipolar teen.
Correct.
Did that seem plausible to you?
No.
What about a dog thief or her husband? Did that seem like a plausible suspect?
No.
The Daybell residence, can you describe the area where it's located? Is it a city? Is it rural?
So the Daybell residence is at 202 North, 1900 East, at a crossroads, which is a rural area and a farm community. On the east side of their house and the northeast side of their house is just open field for several hundred yards. It's a farming area, and it's very open.
Do you get a lot of reports of masked gunmen in that area?
No.
Do you know, I believe in that email from Tammy, she referenced that this had happened at night, this attempted shooting?
Correct.
Where this house is located, are there street lights or city lights?
No, at the time of the attempted shooting on Tamara Daybell, there was a blinking yellow light, but that would have been the only light around the area.
And you'd talked earlier about some location data in relation to a device associated with Alex Cox. Was that device in the area of the Daybell residence earlier that day on October 9th of 2019?
The Homer J. Maximus, a device associated with that, yes, there was.
And are you aware of one of the roads that runs by the Daybell residence? I think their house sits at an intersection, is that correct?
Correct.
And one of the roads is the Salem Highway.
Yes, one's the known as the Salem Highway or 1900 East, and the one that crosses that is 200 North.
And on that 200 North, are you aware or familiar with some kind of a pullout for a canal?
I am.
Judge, we're not talking about that. We're going far afield.
I'll sustain that. I think it's beyond the scope, Ms. Blake.
Your Honor, the detective was asked a lot about why he didn't follow up on certain leads. I think this goes directly to that. So I think it is within the bounds of the cross.
Of the direct you did, it's beyond the scope, and with the cross as well, so I will sustain the objection, Ms. Blake.
With this particular gun that we've talked a lot about, can you tell by looking at it if it is threaded for a silencer or a suppressor?
By looking at it, yes, you can put a suppressor on there.
If you put a suppressor on a firearm in your experience, can it change the sounds?
Yes.
When you conduct an investigation, do you go where the evidence leads you?
Yes.
Is that what you did in this case?
Yes.
And is that in fact why you were looking at searches associated with Homer J. Maximus?
Yes.
And is that in fact why you looked at shooting range logs, specifically looking for anyone or an identifier associated with Alex Cox?
Yes.
You were asked by defense if you had a chance to talk to Tammy about the paintball gun incident. You responded you did not.
Correct.
Is that because she was killed 9 to 10 days later?
That is correct.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. That'll conclude the testimony of Detective Kaaiakamanu. I believe he'll continue to be made available to the state. Is that correct?
We would actually ask that he be released.
Okay. Any
No objection.
All right. Thank you for your testimony today. Counsel, could I have a brief sidebar before we call another witness?
This is an examination of the hidden human condition
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
with Tony Bruschi.
Good testimony. This just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper, does it not? Press subscribe wherever you download podcasts. You don't miss any of our discussions on this case and the many that we're following for you. You can get a complete list of all those cases and podcasts in the episode description. Go ahead and check that out. My name is Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.